Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's September 15th, 2018, and I'm out next to the west garden plot. I've been adding some compost to some of the beds recently, and today I decided to take a break from that and install a frost-free hydrant. I'm going to be using Bumblebee, the mini excavator. I've got the grading bucket on it. I've gone ahead and we have kennel panels all the way around this system. I've taken one of the kennel panels out and put it to the side so that I can get the mini excavator up inside of the western plot. The hydrant's going to go right up against the building, or close to the building. As you can see, there's a 2-foot overhang on the building. So that's something I got to be very careful with, that when I bring the mini excavator up close to the building, you don't want to get too close if you don't have to. But we want to make sure that the boom and the cab on the excavator doesn't do any damage to that area. There is a 1-inch black plastic pipe that goes around the perimeter of the building, comes around to this side, and then goes across to the east side of the bed. So what I'm going to try and do is dig down with the excavator, get close to the site where the water line is, then hand dig it out some. But first I'm going to lay a tarp down so that I'm not putting the gravel on top of the permanent raised beds and the paths. Lay the tarp down up there, and then start excavating, and then see if we can get the water turned off and potentially get this hydrant installed today. So here we go. Well, I'm back. I've gotten the hole excavated. I've exposed the 1-inch PVC black plastic pipe, which is a polyethylene. Something that I'll say about it is, when you put in your pipe that goes under the ground and goes at various spots around the property, it needs to be below the frost line. So here we're always putting it 4 feet or deeper in this part of the country. And I think going deeper is even more important, and I'll talk about design and putting in utilities and all that in a future video. What I recommend if you're a homesteader or starting up a farm and you're young and you foresee many, many years ahead of you needing these services, because going deeper is usually much better. But anyways, this is a 4-foot burial, 160 pound or greater pounds per square inch polyethylene black plastic pipe, 1 inch in diameter, inside diameter, that goes around the building here. I've just dug down with Bumblebee, the mini excavator, and then hand dug the rest of the way to expose the line. There's been a little bit of a cave-in. The walls have caved in and covered up the pipe again. I'll get down there, uncover it in a minute. The other thing I did do is I had the main shutoff valve going to this building and that building and going out back. I shut that one off. I have shut-off valves that are hydrants below the ground, so we can shut off the water line without there being anything coming above the ground. So that's set at this point. Now we're using a frost-free hydrant. This one here is a 6-foot frost-free hydrant, which means that it's 2 foot above the ground and 4 foot below the ground. The most important part of it here, this brass valve down here at the very base of it, this valve needs to be below the frost line. So when it's installed, the water line goes through this will penetrate through the water line and continue on to other places in the property. Or if it's the end, instead of it being a T setting here, it'd be just a J as well. This is the part where the valve is. This is not the valve up here. This is a handle that operates a piston. So this shaft right here, which is adjustable, it's a brass adjustable rod on here, and that brass rod attaches to a steel rod inside of the galvanized 1-inch pipe. So this is made so it won't rust. The brass parts that are exposed out here are made so that they don't rust. There shouldn't be much air getting inside of here, but we'll bleed it out each time, and I'll talk about that in a second. So from this apparatus that you're actually using to open and close the valve down at the base has a long rod within this 1-inch pipe, this galvanized pipe. Then when we get down to the other end, right here is where the valve actually is, and that rod comes down and actually has a sealed brass fitting that fits into it. That is the plunger of the valve. It's not like a ball valve. It's not quite like a gate valve, but this plunger reaches down and seals off the valve so that water cannot come up through this at all. And when you close the handle up at this end, as it pushes the valve past this little weeping hole here, the water is allowed to drain back down because water's been coming out through this end of the frost-free hydrant. You can hook up a hose to it or hook up whatever you want to it. And water is going to come out at full pressure through your pipeline. But when you close this off, the valve down below is closed, and that allows air to come in through here and drain this whole 1-inch pipe. So 6 foot of air is going to come down in here, and you'll actually hear that sound as water weeps out of this little hole here. That's why it's really important to have some gravel or sand material around this area that allows that column of water to drain down in here and drain off into a different part of the property. Now, if this was a terminal end, instead of it being, I'm cutting this into the middle of a line, so I'm using a T-valve. This is a hydrant T-valve. The difference between a regular T-valve, meaning that there'd be a hose bib here, a hose here, and a hose here. This is a hydrant T-valve, so it's a male threaded end here that threads into the valve on this frost-free hydrant. And I use Teflon tape. The other thing I do is I try to orient the direction of the pipe that the water line is going with that T-valve, and I make sure that the handle is facing in the direction that I want it to go. So when you snug this down, snug it into the valve, you just want to make sure that you're paying attention to where you actually want the direction the water's coming out. When it's up against a building, you want to make sure you have it directed appropriately. If it's out in the middle of a field or next to a horse pasture, you know, if you're doing it next to an animal enclosure, especially if the horses wear halters, you really want to have this away from them where they can get their halter hooked on the end of this frost-free hydrant. So I'm going to dig out the rest of the caved-in wall now, cut into the line, let the water drain out of the area down there. Then I'm going to cut the line so that I've got about 1 1/4 inches missing out of the line. Heat up the black plastic pipe. Put 2 pipe clamps on each side, slide this into, put the 2 pipe clamps onto the black plastic pipe before sliding the pipe onto this brass fitting. Same thing with the other side. So here we go. Okay, so I just finished putting the hydrant in. What I did do was I removed the caved in material out from around the pipe, excavate out around the pipe, go down a good inch, you know, 3/4 of an inch to an inch below the level of the pipe, get a couple of inches on each side of the pipe. You know, I like it about 6 or 8 inches on each side of the pipe because we've got to flex that pipe in order to put the hydrant T-valve in. So I cut out this much, just shy of the width of the center part of that T-hydrant valve, that brass part that I showed you. Then I went ahead and put the stainless steel pipe clamps, 2 on each side of the pipe. Now we have an opening between the 2 ends of the pipe with 2 stainless steel clamps on it. Next thing I did was the supply side. I made sure that my hydrant was oriented correctly so that the orifice where we hook the hose up to is where I want it to be. And then I go ahead and I heat up the supply side of the 1-inch black plastic pipe, push the hydrant T-valve into that black plastic pipe. I don't clamp it yet, but I heated it up with a butane or propane torch first so that the plastic is somewhat more malleable, so when I slide the pipe in, don't overheat it. You just want to heat it up so it's hot to the touch. You don't want it melting. Then once that side was in, I didn't tighten down the clamps on that side yet. I went ahead and pulled the other side up, heated that up, brought both ends of the pipe up out of the ground, because when they're put back together, that's going to swedge right tight to that hydrant T-valve. So I bring them both up, hydrants up here with the supply side. This is the part that continues out to the rest of the property. Heated this up. 2 clamps are already on this pipe ready to go. Put the hydrant inside of it there, the hydrant T-valve, slid it right on till it was nice and snug. Double check, make sure that the hydrant was straight up and down. Put the pipe clamps on each side, snugged them up, tightened them up. Then the next thing to do, go turn on the water supply line to the hydrant. I turned that on. I made sure that when I was draining the line, that the hydrant out further, was closed off so that there was real full pressure that this hydrant had. Checked it for any leaks at all. Then, before doing any backfill, I turned on the hydrant. Water shot out of it just like a jet, like it should. Turned off the hydrant. Nothing was leaking, and the weeping hole, which drains the column of the 1-inch galvanized pipe, had a nice 1/4 inch stream of water shooting out of it, and so we know that was good. Now my 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch weeping hole that drains the column of that, I face towards the building on here, because this is about 17 inches away from the building. There's a 2-foot overhang, so I'm still underneath the overhang, and that's all gravel, backfilled, really number 2 stone in there, and then we have the corrugated black plastic pipe that drains excess water that comes off the eave as well. Now that goes into the garden here, which was a later design, but that whole system is set up that way. But before backfilling, always make sure that there aren't any leaks. Then when you backfill, you want to use really small, either use sand or screened gravels, nothing sharp, no big rocks, no flat rocks with sharp edges. You don't want anything to be cutting in or working its way when a super heavy frost comes, if you don't have enough snow load. Whatever it is, things are going to shift some, especially if there's moisture down in there. And you just want to make sure that there's nothing going to rub up against it, especially in traffic areas. I've had to replace a line under my driveway because I had big, heavy equipment, 30-ton excavators coming in, dump truck loads of stone, tractor trailer loads of block as well, large cement trucks to pour concrete around here. And over time, even though it was gravel down there, there was some abrasion up against the pipe and there was hairline cracks. So 160 pound PSI is what I recommend, or heavier, for anything that you put in underground. Always go below the frost line and further if you want to be extra safe. Well, the hydrant has been installed. The mess has been cleaned up. Thank goodness for the tarp. That worked out really well. I've got it hooked up to feed the hydrant hooked up to the central garden plot to feed that system for right now. So if you have any comments or questions about frost-free hydrants or underground shutoff valves, make a comment down below. If you thought this video was of value, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and certainly folks, have a super fantastic day. Bye-bye now.